This is the Movie Club, and I'm your host, Tim Rayne. On today's episode, we'll be discussing Alan J. Pakula's classic 1976 political thriller, All the President's Men. It stars Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford as the journalists who investigated Watergate. In fact, the film was released only a couple years after the scandal broke. All the President's Men has gone on to become a teaching aid in many university journalism classes because of its ripped-from-the-headline story and its questioning of journalistic ethics and methodology.
There's been a break-in at Democratic headquarters, and they were bugging the place. Woodward, Bernstein, you're both on the story. Now, don't get up.
Redford.
I'm Bob Woodward of the Washington Post. Mr. Markham, are you here in connection with the Watergate burglary?
I'm not here.
Hoffman.
Hi, this is Carl Bernstein of the Washington Post, and I was just wondering if you can remember...
All the President's Men.
One could argue the film is as relevant today as it was 40 years ago. Not unlike Network, All the President's Men questions journalistic integrity. Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman's characters may have come from two different worlds, but their intense need to know, no BS work ethic, caused them to unravel one of the most embarrassing and troublesome political scandals in American history. All the President's Men is a dense film that requires attentive viewing, and it is a demanding experience. However, it is a rewarding one. My co-host today is Adam Bowie, longtime community supporter, writer, and journalist for the Daily Gleaner. He has written numerous important local stories and has experienced the current changes in print media firsthand. Adam, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me.
I was really happy that you're one of my first guests. The fact that you were interested, you gave me a list of films, all good. Do All the President's Men seems to be very much in line with what you do, like your own personal life. Do you remember the first time you seen that film?
I can't remember like the day or what I was doing. I love 70s filmmaking, and there was just an era and a look to films then, and a daring that you don't always have now. It's just different now, I guess. And this film, I remember I bought the DVD. I hadn't seen the movie yet, but I knew it was the classic journalism film. It was my first chance to sit down and screen it, and when I watched it, I was just like, yes, like they really nailed it to me. What the job is, and the pursuit. Obviously, I'd read about Woodward and Bernstein before, and it wasn't until I had, was just starting in journalism that I watched the film, and it blew me away. It's just such a great detective story. It's a great journalism film. It's a great 70s period piece. It's political. It's everything all in one. What is important to note is this didn't start out with these guys looking to take on a presidency. This started out as a break-in at a hotel, and it's very weird that they just kept pressing. They said this is very odd, and they kept pressing for details and reporting the story, and that's the job. What I love about the movie is it shows the minutia of the job. The phone calls to the wrong guy that does nothing. It takes you nowhere. It's just a waste of time. But you have to go through 50 of those calls to get the one that you really need, and that's the job every day. That's the whole thing. Nothing comes easy, and it's only gotten harder over time. There's more walls, there's more privacy concerns with documents. All this stuff is harder. It was always hard, but even now with increased communications, there's new challenges all the time. There's new things happening all the time that make the job hard to get the information you need.
Even 40 years ago when that film came out, at the characters that Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman are playing are young, and they're also challenging at the time the old school way of doing things. Did you notice that, like in terms of how the methodology of what people do as journalism in that film, was that being questioned?
I think that they're brash and they're obsessed with the story, and they're running headlong in, and that's what's great about the every newsroom has editors who've been there and done it, and they have the experience and the know-how, and they've been through many different experiences, so they have a real wealth of knowledge to sort of help guide these guys along the way, because just when they think they're getting somewhere, they think they've made an important break. The editor, Ben Bradley, who's a real legend in journalism and is an important character, there could be a lot of movies made about him, but like the Post is also largely about Ben Bradley, and it's not quite as good as this. This is their big triumph, right? The Post tells a story of the Pentagon Papers, which is a really exciting journalism breakthrough as well. But this is the story in journalism. This is like the most amazing thing that journalism produced in the last 100 years, kind of thing. These guys, reported a story about a break-in at a hotel, and they wound up taking down a presidency and exposing corruption at the highest levels of the American government. And that's what journalists are doing. They're in pursuit of the truth, and when people are trying to hide things and cover things up, journalists want to tell the story about what's happening.
So it almost becomes a personal search.
Yeah,
you internalize it, and that's what these characters do really well.
They're living it.
They're living it, and the other side of it too is Robert Redford made a comment about the film, saying that these two characters couldn't be more opposite.
Yeah.
And what united them in their even in their difference in political beliefs and everything else was the story.
Yeah, and that's a really important point, is that different people have different skills, they have different manners, ways of doing things, and Bob Woodward was a sort of a very different character than Carl Bernstein, who was I heard he had been kicked around from a lot of different jobs in journalism. He was a bit of an agitator. He's a different personality type, whereas Redford was Redford's characterization of Bob Woodward is the more smooth, character, right? But both those guys were hungry and were interested in the story. They were all in on this story, and they felt that there was something else happening here, and they kept pursuing it, and they got to the truth. But by working together, which is it's not, I wouldn't say it's common, but it's not uncommon either. It happens from time to time, but the Post decision to put them both together on the story really paid off. They both had different skill sets and experiences they could bring to it.
That's something that I thought was really enlightening for me, watching it this time, maybe just because I've experienced things different in my life since I've watched it before, but they're taking a risk every time they take a story on. They're investing in time, money, resources, and they don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah, and that happens with, all journalists invest themselves into their stories. This one, because they were dealing with some very serious government agencies, they felt their lives were in danger. They were being concerned about surveillance. They were tipped by the FBI that they were. These things are very high level stakes at play here, right? A presidency, all the power that goes with that. So when a journalist is on a story, they invest their passion into it. They often bring, most journalists bring stories home at night. They're thinking about things. I've done that many times where, you put your kid to bed and then you're playing on your phone trying to find that next piece of the puzzle. And, that's something they do because they can't stop thinking about it. It's a calling. The industry is a calling. If you want to be in this field, you have to care about the people who are trusting you to tell their story, and you can't help but sometimes when you're on an important story, you get obsessive about it. You're thinking about it 24/7.
So you think
really
the film really portrayed that really well? I thought.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, when these guys are engaging sources, and Deep Throat is the most famous source of all time, in all journalism stories, right? A guy, you're meeting him in a garage, you had to take taxis and change taxis to make sure you weren't followed, and very clandestine meetings, and that kind of stuff is it makes for entertaining film, but they really did those things to take precautions to make sure that no one knew where they were getting their information.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're, like you said, is super sensitive, and they didn't know where it was coming from. Now they actually know who Deep Throat was.
Yeah.
That wasn't revealed till 30 years later.
No, Mark Felt kept that, and so did Woodward and Bernstein. They kept that secret until the very end, when I guess it was right before Mark Felt was, he knew he was going to pass away, so he kind of revealed it.
Wow.
And, that he felt strongly that people need to know what was happening, and, he he also didn't just give up the farm and be a whistleblower completely. He sort of coached them along the way to help him find his way, but he sort of made sure they were on the right path, I guess is a great way to explain it.
It's the other thing about it too was that I always felt like the film. I love the fact that you mentioned that you have a love for the 70s new Hollywood films, which I do too very much. My favorite as well. There's something gritty about it.
Yeah.
And it's also like Network, another film that challenges like journalism integrity. Right now, my kid, he's 5, he always says to me, he goes, "I can't take it anymore." I'm like, what's going on? But when you're looking at these films of that time, it was very much about being in the present. And it seems like with this particular movie, they were making the film as it was still unraveling.
Yeah,
to some degree.
A little after, but it was soon after, sort of, 2 years after the events had sort of played out, and then like all the players were still around and deeply involved in journalism. Ben Bradley and Woodward and Bernstein were still sort of involved in journalism, so they wrote a book after everything happened, and the movie was picked up and made pretty soon after that. So Bradley was even able to sort of, at first he didn't really want a movie about this, and then he realized that we're going to make a movie, so it's better to be involved and have try to influence them towards telling the best, most accurate version of the story than to let it go, kind of thing. And then after it all came out, I've seen some great documentaries about Ben Bradley, and they were saying that he really enjoyed the attention. He was a bit of a, he liked being in journalism, and he really liked the fact that people were thinking it was pretty exciting what they did.
Yeah, well, it's legend now, story of legend, and it makes me kind of jump to. It's been 40 years since it's made. There's been so much different technological advances, changes in how media is done. If you were teaching a course, would that be something that you'd want the people to see in the sense of how they portray the process of journalism? Yeah, well,
for students who go to the St. Thomas program, there's a course early on where you learn about some of the great stories in journalism, and this is one of them, right? This is it shows you what being dogged and persistent being able to expose secrets at such a high level can do. It really changed some of the history of the United States. I mean, by exposing this corruption, which was unneeded and sort of, it was just an ethically problematic thing to do. They helped tackle a presidency that many were disillusioned with, and they changed things. And one thing that's really important is Ben Bradley said after the results, after Nixon resigned, he said, "Don't gloat. You're doing your job and keep doing it." Basically, this isn't a time you didn't win a battle here. What you did was you won the battle for truth, and you helped get that information out. And I'm paraphrasing a bit here, but that's what he said. Don't gloat about what happened here and what you did. Instead, celebrate the fact that we live in a place where where journalism was protected enough to be able to do this. And today, with the cries of fake news, many journalists are experiencing tough working conditions. There's a cynicism about journalism, fake news, all this stuff, sensationalism. Often, if you've ever seen movies, if they're not about journalism, like journalists are portrayed as like bloodthirsty vampires who are just hounding victims, and you know what I mean? There's always a negative portrayal of journalists in most movies that aren't about journalism. And it's sort of not what I see on the day-to-day. Obviously, it happens, especially in the biggest stories in the world. But most journalists are out there telling people about their community. They're going to council meetings. They're going to press conferences about problems at hospitals. They're doing things they're tackling issues that affect school children. These are the things that. They're pointing out problems in society and asking questions, how can we fix them? And, in today's world with, the way that leaders stumble into problems and then try to avoid accountability for those problems. Journalism is really important right now, and we have to protect the journalists who are out there trying to find these answers.
So All the President's Men is that's exactly what that film's about.
Yeah,
it's the integrity.
Exactly. This movie's about how a small incident and persistence led to exposing a spying network that people close to the president were aware of and facilitating, and that changed the way people felt about the president. You could never question the president on things. You could never say these things, and we realized that even presidents are human and they make mistakes, and that really opened the door to say, when bad things are happening, you have to point them out and question them and call for change.
I think he's the one of the things of many that you said that was really engaging was, and I never even thought about it until you said it, was the misrepresentation of journalism through as a plot device or as as soon as you said it, I'm thinking entertainment, like Die Hard movies, or any of these films where they seem to be getting in the way, and there's all that, and it's not, it's you're right, and it's almost, you can almost see where it's because of that portrayal in media, it's so easy for it to become a political device, to make stories fake news, which I think is horrible. But what's interesting, because it takes away what you guys are doing, which I think is important, very important work, and archival and all the stuff that you do is huge. Are there other films that you could recommend to someone who is interested in journalism that you saw other than All the President's Men that you think would be good?
This is one of the more famous examples of journalism. It tells the story behind one of the biggest stories in journalism in the last 100 years. But if you really want to know what it's like, and this film really does sort of show the day-to-day, but if you want to know what it's like for a newspaper man, The Paper with Michael Keaton is a film it's just so good. It's unbelievable.
Ron Howard did that.
Yeah, it's a great film, and it really captures sort of some of the things that journalists are dealing with day to day. It's just the lifestyle of it all. He's trying to go out to dinner with his wife, and he's got on a hot story, and he can't stop with this, and he really wants to get this story, and then he finds out there's a sort of plot twist where he finds out they got the story, we're going to get these guys and sort of tell the story, and then we find out, wait a minute, we're wrong. This is not actually true, and he goes to great lengths. He and pisses off his wife, he ignores his in-laws, and he finds a way to get the story and get it right, and it's just a really remarkable story of, if you like journalism, that's a great film. Network, as you mentioned, is another one that really, there's an incredible cynicism there about TV news and the anchors, and you know what I mean, and the producers behind the scenes who are just trying their best to get ahead in life. And broadcast news is another one that a lot of TV journalists really enjoy. There's I like some of the old ones too that harken back to a time that was so different. Kane? Yeah, Citizen Kane, Ace in the Hole is one of my absolute favorite films.
Oh yeah,
that's what you don't do as a journalist. You know what I mean? Yeah. This is like the evil journalist, basically. This is and it was Billy Wilder is just an incredible filmmaker, and to do this is to have this guy, Kirk Douglas, just chewing through the scenery all for himself, leaving this guy down in this cave-in for days so he could just churn out the stories and set himself up to get it back to a New York newspaper job. You know what I mean? It's just unbelievable how evil he comes off in that movie, and you can tell he feels a little bad about it at the end, but it's such a great film.
Man. Actually, it makes me want to watch it. I think it's out on the new Criterion channel. Yeah. Did you see that?
Yeah, I haven't. I don't have the Criterion channel, but I watched a lot of TCM, and it was just played on that again as well. And so I taped it on TCM and
nice.
PVR'd it, and I watched it again the other day, and it's another great journalism film. But there's so many. There's a lot of them. Spotlight, of course, is the recent. That's another one that shows the real persistence, the shoe leather that you have to do to get a good story. You know, there's so much work goes into telling these world-changing stories. You know, that it takes hours and hours of combing through court documents, or in All the President's Men, going through those library receipts. You know, all those tiny papers, go into somebody's office and they make you wait for hours and hours, and you're sitting there waiting. You know, these are the things that journalists run into.
Absolutely, and actually, that's something that I think the film did really well too. It was patient. Like the process was, you're watching a procedural drama.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you felt like you were sitting with them at those desks.
Yeah.
It at least illuminates in terms of the lifestyle, anyway.
There's some things in the movie that just like highlights that, you know, that really stand out as like, they ring so true, you know. I mean, the editorial meetings where everyone's bandying about ideas for what they're going to put on the front page or the front of their section, you know, these things happen in journalism, and it's part of the like fun of the job, right? And everybody's busting each other's balls. That story's terrible, and it's a great story. You know, these kinds of fights that happen are part of the behind the scenes fun of journalism, and that they really nail it. And Jack Warden and you know, those guys who play the city editors who are fighting for the boys and stuff like that, you know, that's they really do add so much color to it, you know. And Jason Robards is just incredible as Ben Bradley. What kind of crazy fucking story is this anyway? You know, some of these lines have just become classic lines because, you know, he does so much. Like his whole movie, he's basically just saying, "Where's the story? What's the story?" You know, this kind of thing. He does a lot with a little, you know, and that face. He's got that face that just sort of looks cranky, and you know, he's getting it right. That the part where Redford's on the phone, Woodward, I guess, is on the phone, and he's switching between callers. I've done that a million times where I'm like forgetting who I'm talking to because you're just juggling so many things. You know, it's part of there's a demand for speed to get these stories, get them fast, get them accurately, and you're sometimes calling people, and the guy you're trying to call all day long calls right when you're talking to another guy you need to talk to. So it's just, you know, that moment where you're mixing names up and everything. I've been there because there's an onslaught of information all day. What people don't always realize about a journalist is that he'll get assigned a story in the morning. He has to become sort of a mini expert in no time, be able to understand it well enough to tell everybody else. You know, you might have 2 hours to get up to speed on it, ask the right questions, get the information you need. Then you have to break it down and be able to understand it well enough to explain it to everybody in the community, right? And you turn it around in no time. And it's quite a unique set of skills. I've seen people come who, you know, they're a really good writer, and when they have all this time, and then to come into the scenario where you have to do this in 2 hours maybe, you know, some people can't. And this film really shows these guys juggling multiple things at once. They're pursuing information here, they're pursuing information there, and trying to bring it all together. And that's one of the things that I love about the film. You know, it's a really important detective story. You know, these guys are building a puzzle, and you know, the way that Pakula puts it together, and the script from William Goldman, a Hollywood legend who's done Butch and Sundance and The Princess Bride, you know, he really gave them a great script to really tell this tale, because some people thought it'd be boring to watch the minutiae of journalism, and you know, it turns out it can be really good.
That's killer.
Yeah.
Thanks, Adam.
No problem. Thank you.
You killed it, man.
All the President's Men. The story of the two young reporters who cracked the Watergate conspiracy.
White House.
Howard Hunt, please.
He might be in Mr. Colson's office.
Who's Charles Colson? Did you know Howard Hunt?
Well, the White House said he was doing some investigative work.
What do you say?
They stumbled into leads.
Certainly it comes as no surprise to you that Howard was with the CIA.
No surprise at all.
They tripped over clues.
We'd like to see all the material requested by the White House.
All White House transactions are confidential.
This whole thing is a cover-up. It's right on our nose.
And piece by piece, they solve the greatest detective story in American history.
There is no way the White House can control the investigation.
I don't want to say any more, okay?
Have you been threatened if you tell the truth?
Is there a cover-up?
Don't you understand what you're on to? Mitchell knew? Of course, Mitchell knew.
Woodward! Bernstein! Get in here!
At times, it looked as if it might cost them their jobs.
You guys are about to write a story that says the former Attorney General, the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in this country, is a crook.
Their reputations.
Why is the Post trying to do it? I don't know.
Perhaps even their lives.